Okay, so my name is Ben Wynn. I am one of the senior consultants at Calidus. We're a software organisation and we do learning management systems, performance management, talent management, 360 recruit, and we also have bespoke content as well. So I work as a consultant on the services team, and I've been at Calidus probably coming up to about 15 years now. And I've worked for 11 of those years implementing products across our suite. But I come across a lot of organizations who have learning and development challenges or HR-based challenges. And so I work with people very closely to help them match their processes to our software or help them to adapt their processes so they can be best fulfilled within our software. So I've got quite a lot of experience of different organizations across all sorts of sectors. I've probably worked with over 300 different organizations in the last sort of 11 years. So if you have a detailed question, there's going to be some question time at the end, hopefully. I might not be able to hear you, but we'll try, or grab me afterwards and I can go into anything in a little bit more detail. So today we're going to be talking about building a learning strategy, or specifically actually building a reporting strategy to support your learning strategy, okay? So hopefully there'll be some pretty pictures you can take photos of. So as I was preparing this talk, I was like thinking to myself, so what exactly is the difference between a learning strategy and a reporting strategy? So there are various industry definitions of the two terms. Some say that a learning and development strategy outlines how an organization develops its workforce capabilities, skills and competencies to remain successful. And some would also say that, well, it might encompass one or more learning intervention. So it might be that you have a learning strategy for doing one thing, or you might have a learning strategy that pushes out a whole suite of learning interventions. You might be wanting to really ramp up your compliance percentages, and so it's going to contain a number of different courses or learning modules. So in contrast, a reporting strategy is there to sort of facilitate this and really is the support for your learning strategy. And without having a reporting strategy, you may roll out your course or roll out your training program that you're designing and then have no idea whether it's a success or not. So reporting very much supports or underpins your learning strategy, okay? So if you think of a house, you might think, well, the reporting strategy might be the roof, but also might be the foundations. So it's no point you having 4 walls and 4 windows if there's water coming in through the roof. So I'm going to go into a little bit more about what one is. So what exactly is the point of having one? So I'm not really, part of the sales team at Calidus, so I sort of tend to say things as they are, and rather than how you might think they should be. So so one of the things you might be wanting to do is to know if you're actually improving or going in the right direction. So you might have created this wonderful program, and it might be e-learning based or it might be face-to-face material. But if you don't know if it actually makes any difference, kind of what's the point? So reporting proves things, okay? And it proves good things and it proves bad things. But the good thing about reporting is that once you've found those gaps, you can plug them and you can do something about it. So it spots gaps. It notices when data's wrong. It notices when maybe the feed coming through from your HR system has got holes in it or spaces in it. So it spots all that, and you can do something about it. And it also helps you plan. So if you roll out a lot of classroom-based training, you need a good reporting strategy to allow you to know, well, what's coming up in 6 months' time? Who's falling out of compliance in 9 months' time? So I can actually plan for that. If you don't start planning your reporting strategy at the beginning of your project, whatever it is, then it's too late to start thinking about reporting once you need to run the report, okay? Because you're going to be slightly gambling on whether it's even going to give you the results you're expecting, okay? So there is a point in having one. So what next? So have a little think about what are we trying to prove? So are the company values being met? Is the learning we've created actually changing behaviours for the better? If you're really interested in compliance, like because you've got, you might be health-based and have to have a CQC inspection, or you might be legally based and have an SRA audit coming up, or anything else. And you know they're going to wrap you over the knuckles if you don't have the right reports to give them in the right format with the right columns. So that's exactly what they want. So just some ideas of what you might be actually focusing your reporting strategy on. So is the whole purpose of the reporting to gather evidence for your upcoming audit? Like, I go into all sorts of organisations and hear like, oh, we've got an audit coming up in 2 months. They want it in this particular format. No one else wants it in that format, but they want it in a particular format. So you need to give it to them how they want it. As I said earlier, you might also be wanting to measure the learning impact, which is quite a difficult thing to do unless you think about it well. You might be trying to prove the usability of some of the software you're training people on, or the usability of the actual content itself, the e-learning. Can people actually use this wonderful video-based content you've got and actually learn something from it? I've mentioned compliance, so a lot of organisations we work with, compliance is quite high up on their list of things they want to sort out and improve. And a lot of organisations have financial targets based on, are we 80% compliant across our workforce, or particularly health organisations that have the CQC going to come down on them. They're like, it's all about, it almost comes down to a matter of life or death, some of the training that they're implementing. And ROI, it's a bit of a buzz phrase in some senses. And I was speaking to a colleague of mine who used to work at the co-op for about 10 years. And they were rolling out some customer service training. And the whole purpose of the customer service training was to improve sales at the end of the day. So they wanted people to have a better experience, and then they'd buy more, I suppose. And so the problem with this was that across the co-op group, they used to roll out all sorts of incentives to try and improve sales. So when they got to the end of the customer service training, they were like, sales have gone up, therefore our learning intervention has done exactly what it should do. And it's proved it. Look, we've got more sales, therefore our e-learning package, or whatever it was, has done the job. The problem was that there was about 10 different other parts of the organisation also doing different pieces of training at the same time, or they might have changed the marketing on some of their point of sale counters, and they all tried to get a piece of the same pie. So it's like, no, our intervention has worked because sales have gone up. No, our intervention has worked because sales have gone up. So you've got to be quite careful with making sure what you're looking at to prove ROI does actually prove ROI, okay? So I haven't got all the answers, but just bear that in mind. So some other things you might be doing. So one thing, I was chatting to another colleague, and she was saying it's really, when she used to be on the customer side, one thing that sometimes happens in departments is that you'll be enrolled on a training course, and then at the very last minute, your manager pulls you off because, frankly, we've got too much work to do, so you can't go on training. And then actually those people aren't trained and they aren't developed, and they don't sort of progress in their careers or whatever they're wanting to do. And she said it's really interesting if you'd be able to report on the difference between departmental turnover and how many people were pulled off their training courses. So, and is there a correlation between the two? So that's just one example of something that having a reporting strategy and saying, we want to focus on exactly that, if you know what you want to report on, then you've got a much better chance of actually reporting on it, okay? So you'll be able to report on, which departments invest the most, which departments invest the least, how much training within your organisation or learning within your organisation is done overall. You might also want to think, well, is what we're rolling out within our business actually trying to sort of increase employee engagement, and then try and find a measure that matches up with that. So I mentioned this earlier, the top right one. So to stay compliant, it's not you can't just rely on rolling out a training course in January and then waiting and then thinking everyone's compliant. You need to be constantly on, who is falling out of compliance, who's being aware of that. Is that just L&D that know that, or do the board know that? Do other stakeholders know that? Okay. So let's move on. So what do you need to do? Right. So what you need to do is you need to know who needs this information. Okay. You need to know, when do they need this information? What do they actually want? What are they expecting when this report lands on their desk? And how are you planning to send them this report? Are you expecting them to go and get it themselves? Are you going to send them an email and it lands in their inbox? Is it going to be pumped into another system? How is this data arriving at the audience who needs to see it? And how much data are you actually putting in these reports, okay? So it might be that you have a system currently, or looking for a system that has some friendly dashboards, and that might give you some very high-level summary. Yes, you're okay. No, you're not. But there might be some audiences within your organization that want to drill down into a little bit more detail, okay? And how pretty does it need to be? So people like visuals, but don't just do visuals for visual's sake. They've got to actually mean something. But sometimes people are put off by the lack of visuals, and sometimes people are put off by the inclusion of visuals. So you've got to be a little bit careful. So once you've worked out what people want and how you're going to gather that information, then you need to do it. You need to actually create the report suite that they're after. So who are the people that need these reports? Now I've just plucked out 5 examples here, okay? So it's important to consider who your stakeholders are and who will be the recipients of these reports. So it might be that if I'm standing in front of a lot of people within the learning and development department here at the moment, it might be that actually quite a lot of these reports are for you. So you might need to know, as I keep saying, what training is coming up in the future, or how are you doing on your compliance targets, or are people actually doing this training and then actually it has an effect on their day-to-day work lives, okay? It's likely that some of the reports that you need to create are going to senior managers or even up to board level, and they want to know, I just want to know if we're going to get slated on the next audit or not. That's all I care about. Have a big tick or a cross, and you can worry about the detail. But the board level might want some real flag headlines, are we compliant or not? Okay. So, as I said earlier, you don't wait until you need the report to start thinking about designing the report. Okay. So, how do these different people's needs differ? So we've got business partners within the organisation that are predominantly looking after people. You've got team managers. You've got board level people. You've got external auditors coming in who might not even be as part of your organisation. So you might have internal auditors that are checking what the external guys are expecting. But those external auditors, well, they don't necessarily care about how it's branded or whether it's got the company logo on there. They just want to see the data, okay? So people's needs differ. And not only do their needs differ, but the technology that these different people may have differs as well. So there might be someone who's just a team manager who has very little time, and actually some organisations we work with, they don't necessarily sit in front of a PC every day. So they might want to receive the report on their phone or access their emails through their phone. So it needs to be presented in a way that's accessible to the audience you're sending it to. It might be that, as I said, external auditors want a lot more detail. So they want to be able to drill into the specifics and find the holes in the report. So that's what they're looking for. When you go and talk to these people, because I'm saying this should be a information gathering exercise, don't just assume you know what they want. They might say to you, this is what we want, but does that match up with what they actually need? So you've got to weigh that up. And is there a theme amongst these different stakeholders? Are there any overlaps? So do some of the reports you're planning on creating actually fulfill two audiences? So that could save you time. And also, how do they want it? Do they want it as a flat file, a PDF? Do they want to be able to edit the data once you send it to them? And like I said earlier, do you want to export this data into another system that's then going to present it in a different way? So you might have worked out what people want, but how often do they want it? Do they want it daily, weekly, fortnightly, monthly? Like, how regular do people want to have the answers? Do not spam people, okay? So people, if they start to get the same email over and over again, they'll turn off to what you're sending them, okay? So to give an example of, say, you're introducing a piece of e-learning into the organization, you might want to go, right, we're rolling this out to the entire business. On launch, I want to check how many people are doing it, how many people are getting through the training. Are people getting through and passing the training? Just to sort of, hopefully you've tested this before you do this, but are people actually getting to the end? And then once you've sort of gone through that initial peak, maybe, of usage, you might want to say, okay, well, who's left? So you're looking at numbers. How many people used it immediately? How many people are left to go? And then you might go, well, when towards the end of the sort of initiative that you're trying to roll out, how many people are left? Like, who hasn't done it? So it might start with general numbers. So, 80% of people have done it, 20% to go, let's chase those 20. And then you might get down into the handful of people and go, right, we need to get their managers to give them a kick. So, because this is really important from us from an auditing point of view. Okay. So, once you start sort of investigating into what reports you need, you may come to the conclusion that actually maybe one report's not enough. So we need to create one report for, say, the sort of higher level stakeholders or higher level managers within your organization, and you want to create other reports that are just headline numbers, okay? So I'm conscious of time, so let's move on. So there's a little, let me just do this slide here. So to chase or not to chase, I often go and see organizations and they're asking about, oh, the problem with our managers is they don't really want to manage anyone. And so who's doing the chasing? Is it L&D doing the chasing, or can you actually empower your stakeholders to do the chasing for you? So if you can sort of emphasize the business requirement for the initiative you're rolling out, I'd like to sort of encourage you to see if you can go as high as possible and not have to sort of be chasing individual employees within your organization. So maybe you send a summary report to one of your department heads, and actually it's then the department head that chases his or her managers, and then it might be the individual managers that check their dashboard and go, oh, okay, it's Johnny or it's Susie who's not done their training, and they can do that. But if L&D are having to run around chasing individuals the whole time, then all you're going to do is run around chasing individuals the whole time. So that's just a little bit of a side step there. So what exactly is required? And you've gone and talked to the different people in the different organizations, or not different organizations, different parts of your organization. And remember the guy on the right, or the lady on the right there, she's not even in your organization. So she's going to come in periodically, like yearly or every 6 months, to check the data for whatever you're producing. So each of these people have got a different dream as to what they're going to receive. And you need to make sure that what they actually want, A, is what they need, but that you understand what they need, okay? Just to give you an example, I often go into different organizations and people use the word competencies, but they use the word competencies to mean 20 different things. So sometimes it means skills, sometimes it means technical ability, sometimes it means physical ability, sometimes it means something to do with the annual review. So people use the same word in different contexts. And likewise, when you're trying to assess what are the reporting needs of your audience, they may use certain words, but you need to clarify, do those words mean what you think they mean? So what I would encourage you to do is when you go and speak to the different people in the different parts of the business, just get them to scribble down a sketch of what they're expecting to receive when they get something, and then you'll know exactly, or you might be slightly closer to go, so when you use that word, you actually mean this, okay? So one other thing, you know, people, a few years ago, people like all sort of started to get a bit wowed by doughnut graphs, and really all a doughnut graph is a pie chart with a hole in it. So don't get sort of obsessed with like pretty little visuals. If it doesn't mean anything and it doesn't actually give people the answer they want, then it really shouldn't be on your report. So you do have to, when you gather all this information about what people want, one massive question you need to ask yourself is, do you actually have the underlying data? You know, if it turns out that the person, the external auditor, the very thing they're after doesn't even exist, then you're going to be in trouble. So it may well be that the reason they wanted this piece of data to be on their report is because they're used to having access to that piece of data in a different system that your organization has. And that data may well actually be within your HR system. So feed it in. Get a bit more data fed into your learning management system, and then you'll be able to report on it. So if there are data holes within the requirements, see if you can plug them, and if you can't, address the expectations of that individual, okay? So what data are we looking at here? I guess we're looking specifically at, if I'm looking at just course completions for a moment, are you like, is it realistic that, and I often hear this, that people want to have 100% completion rate and then it's a success? Now that's all very well if you never hire anyone again, and so you have no turnover. And so you've got to split your audience into two. So are we talking about new starters here, or are we talking about people who are no longer new starters? So that's a slightly more static audience. So you can go, right, they've been here for a few years, I can measure who hasn't done it, who has. But the problem with new starters is you might start to roll out your learning initiative and you're reporting and you're 100% great. Then a week later, 4 people start and suddenly you're not 100%. So your percentage compliance is going to ping up and down all the time. So it might be that you need to just lower the bar slightly to say 95%, or actually treat new starters differently from existing staff. When it comes to status, are you looking at pass, fail, or are you looking at complete, incomplete, or attended, not attended, or cancelled? Like what statuses are you actually, what do you think is successful? And I've come back again and again to, but did it actually work? Like you've rolled out this training initiative, but did it actually make any difference? And just thinking a little bit about the data, you might have a wonderful authoring tool that's capable of doing all sorts of things, but it doesn't actually communicate that data to the LMS that it sits inside. Or actually, is there a bit of a disconnect between the system, the software they're using, and the software that's reporting on it? Do the learner actually know they're supposed to be doing this content? Like, have you communicated to them to say, this is really important from an organizational point of view? Does the learner know they've got to do it, but they've got no idea they've got to do it before a certain deadline? So this needs to be communicated. Does the learner have time to actually complete the content? Like you've sort of been rushing and rushing to build this lovely course and work out your reporting strategy, and that's given the organisation 4 days to then do the course. Are you actually giving people enough time to do it? Are you an organisation that has lots of different languages and your content is delivered to people in different language versions? Do you have a system that actually reports on a single item for, say, fire safety training, or is it reporting on fire safety German, fire safety French, fire safety Czech? Like, what are you reporting on? One thing or many things? A lot of our organisations we work with need to analyse the number of attempts made on content. Sometimes that helps you to work out whether there's problems with the content itself. Or they might want to report on the time it takes to complete a piece of content. You might have got a third party to create you an hour's worth of e-learning, but actually it's taking people an hour and a half to complete because they're just getting stuck on the quizzes the whole time. And that has an impact on your organisation because people are spending 50% longer in the learning than they're expecting to. So before, that's a lot of good ideas for you to go away and think about, but before you start building anything, what have you already got? You may actually already have a report that is like 50% of the way towards what you want. Or you may already have an expert in a department that used to be an L&D years ago and has moved on and knows exactly what you need for the external auditors. So do a bit of investigating around the business to find out what you've already got, what knowledge have you got, what evidence have you got, and especially if you're trying to prove ROI, make sure you absolutely find out what is the status quo now. And then when you report in 6 months' time, you've got something to compare it against. If you start to try and prove ROI after the horse has bolted, so to speak, you're going to not remember the state it was in the beginning, okay? I need to accelerate. So how do people want this to be delivered? And I mentioned this earlier. You might want to export your data into another system. It might be back into your HR system, or it might be somewhere else. And so it might be CSV is the most appropriate format, in which case you don't have to worry about branding. You're just sending data back. It might be that the audience who want this want to manipulate it, so you might use Excel. Or it might want to be in a static format and looks very pretty, so you might do it as PDF, okay? Once you've worked out exactly what you want to do, then start to design it. But whatever you do, don't design your reports without any data. So the number one sort of problem I come up with against sometimes is I'm trying to design a report, but I've only got a bit of sample data, which maybe has only got 2 departments. So I'm trying to lay out my report thinking there's going to be 2 departments. And then eventually the data comes in and I've got 79 departments. And so it changes the format of your report. Once you've built a skeleton, only then I would apply the branding. So get the data, sketch it out, and then make it pretty. But don't do it the other way around. So, checklist for you. So, when you start your learning ideas, your learning strategy, make sure you have a plan. Make sure you know your audience, know what they need, know what the format of the report is that they require, know when they need it. Do they want it monthly or weekly or 6 monthly? Do you actually have the data that you're planning on sending these people? Design it, make it look nice. If it's going to be in a format that can look nice, make it look nice. But make sure you're not just making it look nice because you like it to look like that. Make sure you understand what your audience wants and design for them. And also, how much work's involved. Don't leave your reporting to the last minute. Oh, and have a communication plan as well. You might want to actually tell people you're doing this and also tell people they've got a deadline to meet as well. So there's a bit of a crossover there between your learning strategy and your reporting strategy. So then you can just do it. So you've learned all this stuff, you've gathered all this information, then build it. But I probably should have put this in at the start. Don't forget that you're going to need to test this, okay? You might all be used to testing your e-learning or testing the rollout of your classroom training or whatever you do, but don't forget to test your reporting, because at the end of the day, this is the answer people are waiting to receive. So do it, run a little pilot, make sure that when the report lands, it actually opens. The number one problem organisations have is they'll design it on screen, and then when it gets sent to them the first time as a PDF, it wraps over 2 pages, and they weren't expecting it to do that. So make sure you test it. So some of the things you might want to test are test the requirement, test the layout, test the volume of data, test the delivery format, test the accuracy of the data. Does that report actually arrive at the place that you're sending it? So all those things. And then really, once you've done all that and you've tested it to death, then you're ready to launch. Okay. Thank you very much. But if anyone's got any questions, come up to me afterwards. So, thank you.